Studies at Austin Community College, and welcome to Civil Society, where we explore issues affecting our communal well-being through a nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACCTV, but given COVID, we're going virtual for our 4th season. Our center is committed to being an anti-racist organization, to accelerating our personal learning journeys, confronting our biases and blind spots, and creating opportunities for others to do the same. This episode is part of our 10-part series on the Black experience in Austin, to be followed with similar series on Latinx, Asian Pacific, and Native American Indigenous experiences in Austin. As we said in our public statement on racial equity, we're moved by a new sense of urgency to heighten our community's consciousness of institutional racism and systemic impediments to racial equity, and to aggressively progress on the continuum to racial equity to fulfill America's promise to all of its inhabitants. You can access recordings of our earlier episodes and register for future programs at nonprofitaustin.org/civil society. My guest today is Dr. Froswa Booker Drew, a long and dear friend who is currently Vice President of Community Affairs and Strategic Alliances at the State Fair of Texas. Our focus is on white privilege. Froswa is co-founder of Heritage Giving Circles, Heritage being capital H-E-R, Heritage Giving Circle, and an author of 3 workbooks for women: Fly Away, Ready for a Revolution, 30 Days to Jolt Your Life, and Rules of Engagement, Making Connections Last. She's also a writer for several publications around the world, including Business Women Media, as an advice columnist on workplace issues. She speaks on a variety of topics, such as social capital, networking, leadership, diversity, community engagement, to national and international audiences, and has been recognized as a 2019 Dallas Business Journal Women in Business Award, was the 2012 Outstanding African American Alumni Award from the University of Texas at Arlington, and is a diversity ambassador for the Red Cross. And there's more, but rather than telling you about Froswa, I'd rather have Froswa talk with us. Good morning, Froswa. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Barry. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We've been colleagues and friends for about 20 years, since your early childhood, I think it was.
I love you.
You've always been a passionate and energetic advocate for social justice and a straight talker. So how are you able to translate that passion in your current role as Vice President of Community Affairs and Strategic Alliances at the State Fair of Texas?
You know, I was so fortunate to be able to have a position where I started from the ground up. There really wasn't a department for community affairs. There had been, work with the scholarship program and, supporting different initiatives in the community. But to be able to come in and actually develop the program and look at how we use social capital as a lens to work with our community has been a gift for me. I always have been a proponent of asset-based community development. And so how do you make sure that when you're going into communities that you see the assets versus the deficits? And so instead of looking at South Dallas, which is an area that is primarily Black and brown, low income, has not yet received a lot of support in the ways that maybe other communities have, to be able to go into a place like that and see the assets versus seeing it as a place of lack and deficit has been amazing to me, and seeing how the resources and the people that are there and helping folks change the narrative about how they not only see that community, although we know those things, some of those things are real, there are also these positives that exist within the community. So being able to bring people together around that has been a wonderful way of allowing me to use the passion that I have for community, for people, and then also bringing my academic interests to the table and looking at concepts like community cultural wealth, and looking at how communities have not only social capital, but there's cultural capital, and there's, looking at how they navigate their way through as a form of capital, or hope being a form of capital, looking at that kind of a model and seeing South Dallas as a place of wealth instead of deficit has been amazing to marry both, you know, my personal interest and passion around it, as well as the academic.
Superb. So tell us just a little about yourself.
A
Okay.
little.
Not a year by year, not a year by year explanation of your life.
A little.
A little about yourself and what leads you to be so inspired, and if I can add a commentary from my perspective, inspiring.
You know, I tell my staff it's just to do the work. I mean, for me, even at my job, it's one of those things where I go in because I'm concerned about people, but I'm concerned about also legacy. And I don't think quite often in our work, we think about what are the legacies that we're creating for other people. And so I'm constantly thinking about how do we make sure that we're leaving it better than when we walked into it. And my role may be this big, but how do I serve as a catalyst for people and for communities to be able to do what's already in them? I think sometimes we feel like we're bringing something to people, and we may be doing that in some ways, but wow, what does it look like when we acknowledge that they bring something too? And so to be able to bring people together and all of us think about our dreams and passions, that's what's exciting to me. And that's why I love what I get to do, whether it's, you know, through our philanthropic giving or whether it's through the signature programs that we do at the fair. Being able to just do the work is what drives me every day. So I don't necessarily see myself as being inspiring. I'm just somebody who's trying to do something and in a little way make a difference. That's all.
You're modest. So our focus today is on white privilege and its corollary, of course, white supremacy. How do you define white privilege? And to the extent that you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So
what is it experienced by people of color, and how have you experienced it?
Yeah, so, you know, when we talk about white privilege, which has, let me say this, has been around for a long time, people are acting as if, oh my God, it's such a new concept. No, academically, it's been around for a while. And when you look at the work of someone like a Peggy McIntosh, which I totally recommend people read her work, she talks about unpacking this knapsack of privilege. And what it is that for most white people, they don't understand that there is this privilege that you carry with you, whether or not you see it. And so I'm always amazed that people are offended by it, but it's because they don't really understand. There's a privilege that your skin has afforded you that other people may not have that same privilege. So meaning that when you get stopped by the police, the privilege for you may be that you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I might get killed. Or that when you walk in a store, that you may not be followed around the store because of the color of your skin. Or that when you're in class, that you are the representative for the entire race of people and having to explain why Black folks do what they do or feel the way that they do. So that privilege allows you the opportunity not to have to be in those situations. Or I remember when I was in college, my roommate and best friend, I took her to the Grambling Southern game. Historically Black college is probably 30,000 plus people in stands. And she looks at me and she says, she's the only white that she saw there. And it looked like probably across the whole place. And she looked at me and she said, oh my God, I know exactly what you must feel like. I've never felt like this before. That's a form of privilege where you don't walk in and feel like, oh my God, are there others of me in this space? And so that's what privilege, white privilege is. White supremacy is really looking at historically the role of white domination and looking at it from the standpoint of, it was at one point people tried to prove that white was superior, and yet you still have that today, but it was people tried to prove that scientifically, and we know that that's not the case at all. But there was this belief that Black folks and other folks of color were inferior and whites were superior. And so that led out even into how we see countries were colonized, because it was, we're coming in because you people don't know how to take care of yourselves. And so we're going to come in and do this. There's a book that I always encourage people to read that's called Decolonizing Methodologies. And it's by a lady whose name is Linda T. Smith. And she is a Maori. And she talks about in this book, it's one of the most fascinating books that even jolted me because I never thought of it. But she talks about in the books how museums were created, in essence, to take indigenous people's items. And in essence, I can tell the story better than you, and I can protect your stuff better than you can. And so, you know, we never think about that with museums. And there are indigenous groups who are asking for their ancestors' materials back to this day. And museums are saying, no, 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 we've got this. We can care for the stuff better, and we know how to tell the story better. So she even talked about things like Band-Aids, you know, and looking at whose skin tone were Band-Aids even created for. That it says, you know, it's for, you know, every skin tone, but it's not. So looking at things like that in terms of research and seeing how white supremacy has been a consistent thread throughout not only America's history, but the history of the world. That's why it's important to have these conversations, because I don't think people recognize the impact that it has, not just for Black and brown and other people of color and indigenous people, for white people, because you are not getting the full experience of who all of us are because the lens is so narrow. There's a theory called the standpoint theory, which is rooted in feminist theory. And basically what it says is that there are, and another theory called muted group theory. And what these theories basically are saying is that there are groups that voices have not been heard. And so even when we look at research, it is through one lens, and it does not include the voices of other people. And, you know, those theories have then gone on to where you see intersectionality and the conversation around, which Kimberly Crenshaw coined that term, which is basically about there are all these different intersections that happen for a Black person or a person of color that define who we are bigger than I'm Black, but I'm female, but I'm educated. And all these intersections end up impacting my life in a way that it's not that Black men may have one experience, and just because we're Black, they don't have the same experience that I may have as a Black woman. So these are conversations that are important to have, because I think that in having them, we not only educate ourselves and inform ourselves, but it's another opportunity, as McIntosh says, is to take that backpack off and begin to start unraveling what's really going on. And then being able to see, you know, how we change it. And as I always like to say, reimagine the possibilities.
Yeah. So on a similar kind of question, at least in my mind, we all hear many white folks saying that, sure, Black lives matter, but after all lives matter, okay? They'll talk about their own experiences, their own persecution experiences, being biased against and so forth, bigotry, and they tend to universalize the Black experience. And while well-intentioned, I've come to learn that it's very hurtful and insensitive.
Yeah.
What do you say to these good people?
So I give two analogies. You come to me and I tell you my leg is broken, and you go, oh my God, look at your arm. Oh, wow, your arm needs a lot of attention. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, but my leg is really bothering me. It's bleeding. I think I'm going to lose my leg. And you ignore it because you're minimizing the situation that I'm actually experiencing. The other one I give is for my dear Christian friends. And I'm a Christian, but I'm also very skeptical. And that's another conversation about how the church is responding to this. But I've had to say to Christian friends, the Bible talks about there are 99 sheep. And if one is lost, you don't go, oh my God, let's go look after the 99. Good luck. The Bible says go after that one. And right now, the one, or for a long time, actually, the one has been not only Black folks, and in this season, particularly Black folks, but we've seen the one happen in other communities too. But Black folks right now are the ones who need you. And instead of going, oh, let's go look at the 99, even biblically by what you say you believe says that you should go after the one. And so I think what people have to realize is it's not about you sometimes. I think we have created this world where it is so focused on the majority and not paying attention to all of us and the challenges that all of us face, and how do we support each other? Because for America to truly be great, all of us have to be great. Can't just be one group.
Yep. When I reached out to you, I think it was around May 30th. I checked when I got prepared for this episode. And I was confused. I was distressed by what was going on in our society. And I turned to you as someone who I really trust and admire and know, and who I knew would know my intention about what I could do. You sent me a copy of your Facebook post. Obviously, I wasn't the only one. Okay. And I want to quote from it because it really had a profound impact. Quote, "I've been silent for a reason. I needed some time to process my anger and pain." And then you shared some of your experiences and those of your daughter. And this was really poignant since I know both of you. It was powerful and most impactful. It was heartbreaking. And that message, as I've shared with you, changed my trajectory and forced me to pay attention to people and issues that perhaps was my white privilege, whatever, just weren't in my mindset. You wrote, "For my white friends, many of you are stunned and saddened by what you've witnessed. For Black folks, it is part of our experience, and the crazy thing is that it's been normalized for us. The trauma is not new." I'd appreciate you expanding a bit on that.
So in February, I was visiting my daughter who goes to Sam Houston College. She'd kill me if I said high school, college, and university. And I was coming back and I pulled over in front of an officer because he was going slow. I wanted to go the speed limit. So I pull over and immediately lights come on and I'm going, what did I do? So I pull over and he says, "You don't have a front license plate." I said, "It's a rental." "Well, when you take ownership of the car, it's your responsibility." So I'm looking and I'm going, okay, I take it back tomorrow. So what do you really want me to do? So then he says, "You're drinking. Were you drinking?" And I said, "No." And I pull up from the floorboard, which, a friend of mine told me later, you should not have done that. You could have got shot. But I pulled up from the floorboard, hand sanitizer. And I'm going, "Is this what you smell?" Because that's not the same kind of alcohol smell as drinking. And you could tell in my language and everything that I was very coherent and clear. And, he's asking me, "Why did you rent a car? Well, how old is your car?" And I mean, all these questions that were intrusive that had nothing to do with me having a front license plate. And the thing for me, was I was in the same county that Sandra Bland had gotten killed in. So that
Wow.
already freaked me out because of just the symbolism of that. So I'm trying to go home and I'm scared to death. I'm by myself. And I get home and I'm shaking. And immediately I start looking up, who do I send letters to? So I send a letter to the inspector general, but I call a friend of mine who had been in state political office and said, "Hey, this is what happened." He got me in touch with someone really high up and they started doing an investigation. And I think the thing that stunned me with that was how many people go through the same situation but don't have the social network where they can send an email to a friend who's in a position of power to someone else who runs that whole department that, statewide and get answers. And out of it, I got a wonderful relationship with a person who is like a division head for Texas Department of Safety. And that was the coolest thing. And I was like, this is so weird that I end up getting this friendship out of this experience. But how many people don't get that? How many people die? How many people get harassed or go to jail because they have warrants and they're just trying to get home, but they don't have the money to pay for those things. And so it just made me start really thinking about that. And that's why I wrote the post. And I wanted my white friends to understand that just because I'm Black and you look at me and go, "Oh my God, she's articulate." We'll talk about that. Or you go, "Oh, she's so highly educated." Even me with a PhD, who's law-abiding, never had anything on my record, it can happen to me too. It did. And that was the point that I wanted to make with my friends, but I wanted them to also understand that just as you are processing this stuff too, so am I. And I'm processing, generations of this kind of experience. While for many of you, you're just kind of going, "Oh, wow, I didn't know this was happening." There's an author who talks about, for white folks, what they typically may go through is complacency in these issues because it doesn't impact you. You're able to go back and forth and do what you do, where many of us are always having to deal with these experiences over and over and over again. And so I think what happened with COVID is it made it where now we're all at home and we had to look at this stuff before you heard about Botham Jean and you heard about Atiana Jefferson getting killed in her home, and people were able to go, oh, and they kept moving because life was going. And in the midst of a pandemic, we have all been forced to be in a place of pause. And now we're having to look at these situations and figure out, oh my God, this is real. And watching a man die on your screen made it real for everybody. And so now what folks are going through after this complacency, she says that people start going through this period of, it's like a confusion, where there's this cognitive dissonance moment where people are saying, oh my God, I don't know how I feel about this situation. What do I do? What's my role in it? And so then you see people going through this space of trying to figure this out. And she calls it being uncomfortable, which I'm always amazed at, because Black folks have been uncomfortable for a long time. And so people are wrestling with this, oh God, now I have to do something. And what she says is, hopefully people get to this stage of transformation, that maybe through listening to my story and the experiences of other Black people in this time, that you will get to a place where you start doing something and it starts internal, where you start, again, unpacking that knapsack, beginning to start looking at how you too have been affected by being programmed. A lot of white folks say, I'm not racist. I'm sorry, we've all been programmed. When we think about what's the standard of beauty and what is appealing, those things have been programmed to us. And so we all have to understand that we are impacted by it, whether we like it or not, that it is a part of the American fabric of this country and of this world, if we're very honest. I remember reading about, in Brazil, they had come out with years ago, the equivalent of like an Ebony magazine, and these beautiful brown, dark Brazilian women were going nuts because they had never seen pictures of themselves on magazine covers. This, y'all, is not something that is just a United States issue. White supremacy is all over. And so I wanted my white friends to know when I wrote that post that you have to take responsibility too. I can't be responsible for processing your pain, because in the midst of this, I'm trying to figure out what to do. And how do I continue to go through this over and over again? So that's what that was about.
Yeah, that leads me to my next question, which is in that same message you wrote, so to my white friends who are privately inboxing me, I appreciate your concerns and desire to do something. Let me give you some tips. So among those tips was one which was a bombshell to me, okay? Once you said it, I began hearing it all around me, but until I read it, I didn't. And you said basically, it isn't Black folks' responsibility to coach you through this stuff, okay? Again, the tendency to universalize, the tendency to expect, you or anybody else to represent your entire, group, okay? So I'd really appreciate if you could share those. I think you had 8.
Yeah.
If you don't remember them all, we'll accept 7. But
pull them up.
what are some of those tips? Because I thought they were really profound.
One of the tips that I gave, which is so interesting, I didn't realize that it had the impact all of them did, but one of them I gave on that WFAA series that came out was about your money. And a friend of mine sent me a note last night and said, oh my goodness, I never thought about the money piece, that many of us are investing and purchasing things that go against what you believe in. And so when you think about your 401k is being used to support sometimes mass incarceration. It's being used to support various ideologies that you may not support. And so even down to your 401k, you need to pay attention to those things. There are some studies that have come out, and I shared it with her last night, a number of them, to pay attention to that. And also this term of impact investing. How do you begin to start putting your money in places that you really are concerned about, and issues that really resonate with you? And if this is something that's important to you, it can't just be lip service. You really have to demonstrate it with your dollar, because your money is power. And so that's one of the things that I mentioned to people. And I told folks they need to do their own work. You've got to start unpacking this stuff and start looking at your own experiences and those times when folks have told jokes that you knew were inappropriate. But now you got to start saying something and correcting people, because being silent is problematic. You can't just go, well, that's how they are. you have got to begin to start using your voice and stepping up and saying things. But I also challenge people to educate themselves. This is a time where you're going to have to go back, and even what you've been taught in school about American history, you haven't been taught the entire history of the experience of Black people in American history, because for many folks, all they know of is Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman and, Sojourner Truth. But they really don't know and understand the entire Black experience and what was the Harlem Renaissance, and what did that mean for Black folks who were trying to thrive in the midst of such oppression and segregation. Understanding, what slavery really was and the implications of that, because people go, that's so long ago, but there are implications of that that still exist today. And so it's important for you to go and do the work, to research, to learn, and then begin to do something. Can't just call me privately. And that was my thing that I said, you can't call me privately and have these conversations, but you won't publicly renounce it. And that's what has to happen. I won't go through all of them because we'll be here, but that's the gist of them.
I think I'll put them all up on our website,
Okay.
okay? Which I already have done, so.
No worries.
From your perspective, is the current racial and social justice movement different than what happens before?
I think it's different.
Or are we going to be subject to compassion fatigue, like so often happens, and go back to the way things were?
I have mixed feelings. I think it is different in the sense that if you remember with the civil rights movement in the 60s, what made it so impactful was television. People were seeing dogs and water hoses being used on Black folks. And so they got to see it up front and personal every night on the news. What's happening for us now is we're getting to see up front and personal because of social media and the news, because we're home, but social media is putting it in our face. The creation of the cell phone and the camera has totally transformed the way that we have seen and known about racism. So when you see the incidents of the Karens and the folks using their whiteness and weaponizing that against Black folks, and I'm going to call the police on you because I don't get my way, and using the police as a concierge service is problematic on so many levels. But I think that it's different now because of that, and yet similar, because that is really one of the things that spurred the civil rights movement on for whites, was to see that happening and go, I've got to do something. When you look at the protests now and to see that the protests are comprised of folks that are white and Black and brown and Asian and all these different groups, and you're seeing young and old, is heartwarming, because it says that people understand that this is about all of us. And it's not just a Black thing. It's all of us that are impacted when this happens as Americans. My concern, as you talked about the compassion fatigue, I'm more concerned that people are so heavy right now, not only because of dealing with the issue of seeing this in their face, but when you're dealing with the amount of death with COVID, the amount of fear that people have around this disease that you really don't know, being at home for so long, not having the social interaction. I think that what we have to be prepared for is the mental health implications that all of this is going to have when it's over, because it is such a heavy time right now. And if people don't really have places to process this in a healthy way and begin to feel like they're able to contribute, I think what you're going to see are more problems than what we've even, thought about or experienced yet to date.
Excellent point, which we can't ignore. So my direct interview of Time for You is coming to a close, and we're going to open it up to our audience. But I do want to ask you one question that is a little, that's reflective. So knowing today, being where you are today, okay, you say to your younger self about your future, what would you say to them, perhaps to change things or move along the same way? And what do you wish you had known when you were younger?
I would tell my younger self, that's a hard question. I would tell my younger self, it will be okay. I was a kid who was bullied. And so at the time I was wrestling with how I saw myself. So I would say to that little girl, it's going to be okay. We're going to be all right. You got this. I think in terms of what would I have liked to have known was I wish I had known the possibilities in terms of like, and this is going to sound so nerdy, knowledge. When I was in school, I didn't get to see role models of people who were like sociologists and, you know, an array of people. And I think that may be the case for most of us. And when I got to college, you know, and I started taking sociology classes, I was so frustrated that I didn't know what that was. And had I known, I would have gone that route. I wish I would have had more of a diversity of people, and the folks around me did the best they could, you know, push me to go to school and be my best. But I was so limited on examples of possibilities and knowing that there was a body of knowledge out there that was so much bigger. And I only had scratched the surface of it. And I wish somebody had told me and shown me that this is all that's available to you. And I think for a lot of our kids, especially in inner cities, they don't have the opportunity to see the possibilities, where you don't see engineers and you don't get to see what a sociologist is. You never hear of those things. And I just wish I had had that. I'm fortunate that I was able a bit later to course correct and find out what was possible to me. Even philanthropy. Who would have, you know, known that there was a job where you give away money and help communities and make decisions about how to use funds to impact communities? I didn't know that existed. And it wasn't until I was, you know, probably in my 30s where I started going, oh, wow, that's a job. I want to do that. And then realizing how difficult it was to get into that space, because people get in and stay in them for years. But not only that, it was so difficult to get into that space. And then even thinking about in our area in Dallas, the number of Black women who are in positions to even give money, I can count on my hand in a city the size of Dallas. And I'm not talking about CRA people, because that's different. But just in, you know, foundation spaces, the number is so limited. I didn't know that was an option. And I wish I had known those possibilities sooner.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Let's open it up to the rest of our audience. Kate will give people permission to turn their cameras on. And while we're waiting for people to come on, if you could just talk for a second about who have been your mentors, your role models, and what have you learned from them? And
So
then
one of them I'm talking to. Barry, you have been, and I'm not saying that because I'm on your show. People know this about me. You have been such a supporter for me and a cheerleader. You opened up doors and gave me opportunities. And I always tell people, you need to have two types of folks in your life. You need mentors, but you need sponsors. Some of us have mentors, and those are the folks who coach us and tell us good advice, you know, and can a mentor be a sponsor? Yes, you were both. You would give me advice and coach me and tell me things, but you used your social capital and your networks to open up doors for me and give me opportunities to do training and consulting and all kinds of things, really, you know, much younger in my career. And so I'm grateful for having that. And it taught me, you know, the power of relationship. So I'm always telling young people, make sure that you have both of those. You need mentors, but you need the people who are going to say, I believe in you and I'm going to open up doors for you because I trust that you will do well. And so you've been that for me. There are others, but I really want to just highlight you because you have consistently done that for me for years. And so thank you.
Well, thank you. Who else? Somebody important.
Who else has been a mentor? There was a man by the name of Zeb Strong who passed away a couple of years ago and really broke my heart. Zeb knew me when I was 19 years old and started pushing me and just was like, you can speak, you can do this, you can do that. And he too was a mentor and a sponsor. But what was so cool, even in his death, you know, I spoke at his funeral and it was something to see how many people he had done that for. That this man had impacted probably thousands of folks' lives just by going, I believe in you. Hey, you need to do this. I'm going to work with you to do that. And it inspired me so much to want to be that kind of person that you both have been for me. And I've had women like Michelle Bobadilla, who was my first boss, who is still a mentor 30 plus years later. So I tend to keep people in my life a long time. And I'm blessed because I have had such a wonderful circle of mentors and sponsors. But I also have folks that I consider my personal board of directors. because I think everybody needs to have that. And so I've been really blessed to have a group of folks who check me, even when I was getting ready to get my PhD. Before I was like, I don't need it, I'm good. And I had people who were on me like, no, ma'am, you are going now. And so just having, a group of people who not only encourage you and inspire you, but also, put their foot up your, areas sometimes to go, I see more in you than you see in yourself. So that's it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions before I continue on other questions? Kate, anything in the chat box?
No, not yet, but we are waiting for people to start putting them in there.
All right. Or just raise your hand and we'll recognize you directly.
I'm just gonna wave at everybody.
Maggie, are you just moving your hair back or you question? Okay. All right.
See you all.
So based upon all we're saying, based upon particularly the issue you just raised that we don't really know what the long-term impact of the experience of COVID, which everybody's experiencing, the increased realization that some people are experiencing things worse than others, some because of, if I can use the word, pre-existing conditions, because of what our society has created in the past. What do you realistically project will be the racial experience, for example, of the next generation? Your daughter, for example.
It's different. You know why it's different? Because their world is global. I didn't have the internet growing up. She jokes and says, did I have horse and buggies carrying me around? I'm like, really? You think I'm that old? But
I was going to ask you about dinosaurs.
Well, I'm waiting on that one to come soon too, because I get asked about, how was it to walk with Moses and things like that. Where did you have Jesus's, pager number? Things like that. So it's like, really, you think I'm that old? But I think the experience for them is going to be different, because not only are they connected to people all over the world in a way that, I didn't have growing up. It was just my community. I didn't have the technology. I could see them, but to actually talk to somebody in another part of the world, they have that experience. I also think you're seeing people that are coming together and having relationships that are of different races and backgrounds in a way that you didn't have before. And so even the ideal of what multiracial looks like is going to be different coming soon. I think you're seeing particularly more women of color coming into academia. And so you're going to see more professors and teachers who look like their students. So I think it's going to change. Do I think it's going to go away? Of course not. Because whenever you have people that are vying for power, people will use whatever it takes to be able to be in a position of authority. And so it's going to change a lot, I think, when more women are in positions of power, just because the way that we lead and the space that we lead from is different than, always being so competitive in the sense of, I can blow you up. No, I can blow you up more. I don't think you'll see those kinds of dynamics in the same way in the future, especially when you begin to start bringing different perspectives to the table. But I don't think it's going to go away completely, just because of think about it. When you look at how far this has gone back and it still continues to raise its head, it's being taught. And until people, begin to change their way of thinking, someone's going to continue to pass that down. Little children don't start off as racist. When, my kid was little, I would see her in the park, and it's like she had this radar for little children. Didn't matter what color they were, she would see them and just run to them and play like, oh my God, you're one of the small people like me, let's play. Small people unite. And so they would play with each other. They never really looked at race until they're taught, no, you can't play with that person. So until it stops being taught, it'll continue. But I think there's a movement that is going to be more prevalent than that. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Okay. I understand there's a chat question, Kate?
Yes. So Perry would like to know, most companies are creating DEIB departments. Beyond internal audits and social statements, what should these companies be actively involved in?
That's so funny you brought that up, because I'm having a fit about it. Why is it all of a sudden now people are going, wow, we got to do something. This is wrong, when they've known that these situations have been around forever. They knew the complaints that they were getting. There's a book that's called Leveling the Playing Field, which is one of my favorite books. It's by a lady named Frida Klein Kapoor. And in the book, she talks about how companies are losing their best and brightest talent, particularly people of color and women, and how these companies are losing folks, and they weren't paying attention to it. They knew what was going on. And what she did changed my life. She said, when you leave a place, you need to tell them the truth. Because, many of us will walk away and go, well, I got another job. Well, I want something different. And not it's say, hey, it was racist here, because then they didn't know how to change it and it wasn't on record. I think that, those things are still going to have to continue, because even with companies creating these divisions, my concern is, do these staff folks have support? So you're going to create a director or VP of diversity and inclusion, and they have no support. They have no budget to do the work that they need to do. And so once again, it's just it's window dressing. Those companies have to be very intentional about making sure that they are creating the staffing and the support for these departments to be there for the long term. They also have to know that the metrics that they said year one will not be achieved, many of them year one. It takes time to build those kinds of initiatives. And what usually happens is they give them a year, and if things don't turn around the way the company wants, they get rid of the department. That's where we're going to be able to see the true test and hold people accountable, because these are the initiatives that have to be invested in long term. I think companies need to also, as they're developing, these departments, or start looking at their corporate social responsibility programs. So you can hire that, but if you're giving all your money and community to groups who already are well resourced and are really paying attention to some of the small, mid-sized grassroots organizations that are buying your product, but you're not paying attention to them and how you fund them or how you work in community, it's got to be a comprehensive effort beyond the statement. They've got to look at both their internal, and this is what I'm challenging people on. Look at your board of directors. If the boards of these corporations do not reflect the people in community, just like nonprofits, then there is a problem there. So just hiring people and putting a statement up is it good? It's a start, but it can't be the end all to solve these problems.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. The State Fair of Texas is not generally known as a progressive organization.
Not at all.
One might say it's the epitome of the good old boys network. And I don't want to say anything that puts your job at risk. Okay. No. So how do you, as a Black woman, engage people who may, and I'm being a stereotype, be the epitome of, these folks who might not see you in the same way you want to be seen?
What I have to say is I am proud to work for an organization that recognizes, and I've said this repeatedly, that recognizes it was on the wrong side of history. And, I give the story about Juanita Craft is the woman who integrated the state fair. Ms. Craft was an NAACP leader in Dallas. This woman in the 30s was risking her life going around the state of Texas, setting up NAACP chapters. And she decided that she was going to take a group of Black students from Lincoln and a group of white students from North Dallas, and they came and integrated State Fair, Texas. And what is so crazy is in my 20s, I used to work at her house. I curated her home, helped with curriculum, the second year iteration of the curriculum. And so to come full circle and be in the place that she integrated and worked in her place decades earlier has been such a gift to me, because she would have gone, oh my goodness, I did this. And that's how I see it. She did that so that I could be there. We have a wonderful president who understands that, yeah, there were Klan rallies there. They had the Negro Hall of Life during the World Fair in the 30s, tore it down, kept out other buildings up. I think that there is a recognition of history. That being said, I think they also recognize that there's a whole lot to be done. And so part of my work has been really changing the way that the fair has done business in that community. You look at, State Fair brings in all these millions of dollars in 24 days, and that immediate community hasn't benefited. I'm honest, I've only been there, since 2016, but the fact that we were able last year to award 67 organizations almost $500,000. And what we do is beyond just giving money. We're doing technical assistance. We're connecting them to other funders. We're doing trainings and trying to build their capacity, but their long-term sustainability. Many foundations don't do that level of investment. So it even goes beyond the dollar amount. But for me, and my friends say this, do they know who they hired when they brought you in? Were they sure that they knew what they got? My boss, I think, was aware that he was bringing in someone who was going to help them create the change and this time be on the right side of history. We have an amazing board who supports me. We have the first female board chair ever in the State Fair history. Gina Norris is phenomenal and has been very supportive of me. So I say that to say, has there been a lot of change? Yes. Are we done? Oh, hell no. We have so far to go. I even know that there's more that needs to be done, but I'm grateful that I've been given the opportunity with support and not only internally, but even with the external community to begin to start doing some things and using our platform to leverage resources for the community that we're in. It's going to take time, but I'm committed to making things better. And it's not just all us. There are other people that I'm also going, I need you to help too. We've been in the elephant in the room. You have to. I need you to come to the table and let's figure out what we do now to make it better for folks who deserve it. So we're trying, but yeah, it's getting there.
When you told me you were taking that job, I have to admit, I felt a little sorry for the people that were there because they didn't know what was coming. So I must say I had a similar reaction as your other friend.
Yeah,
So,
they're like, what?
but as John Lewis said, it's good trouble.
Yes,
So,
it is. Every day.
Yep. Do we have any other questions on the chat box, Kate?
We don't have any in the chat. Is there anybody else on screen who would like to ask a question at this time?
So Froswa, what have I failed to ask? What have I failed to uncover in this investigative conversation?
I think we've covered quite a bit. I mean, I appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation. How many people would take the risk to talk about white privilege and talk about white supremacy in Austin, Texas, which has some very interesting challenges in itself in terms of, the community in the East Side, how it's continuing to diminish. Every time I come visit, and I haven't been in a little bit, but I had a client there, and I've had a number of clients in Austin, but I would come and it's like, every time I'm like, what's happening over there? Where are all these high rises coming? And seeing the gentrification and how folks are being moved out of Austin into the suburbs. Austin has some very serious challenges that it too has to deal with, just like Dallas or Houston or other places. But I applaud you for having these conversations and beginning to look at it, particularly in the nonprofit community, because nonprofits have a way of excluding themselves from these conversations and going, oh, we're doing good work. We help everybody. I'm sitting on boards now where I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me that you think because you help people, that's the extent of your commitment. And the fact that you are bringing this up, I think should force nonprofits to begin to start thinking about, what is our commitment in this space beyond servicing people? What do our boards look like? And do our boards reflect the community? What about senior leadership? Yeah, we can have folks that are out in the field doing the work and talking to people, but what does senior leadership look like in our nonprofit organizations? The fact that, again, you're raising this says that there are more conversations that the nonprofit community has to have in addressing this issue. And it's not a corporate issue, and it's not a governmental issue only. Nonprofits have to step up and do some work. When you look at the number of organizations that are funded, that are led by Black women in this country, how dismal that percentage is problematic. And so it is time for nonprofits to also start doing some work and changing this narrative too.
And I would just point out that, up on our website, we have the tapes of earlier shows, episodes, and we've indeed explored some of those issues. I would also just highlight that our Center for Nonprofit Studies, one of the things we've done is we're revamping our program and making the whole issue of racial equity and social justice an integral part of every session of the program, and that's 15 days. So, and Froswa, I must say that your guidance and conversations we've had and what I've read and learned from you has been incredibly impactful. That for me, and now all these other people have to suffer because I'm pushing it as well. So, I thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to.
Peggy had one. Peggy
Yeah.
asked about,
Okay.
Peggy, this is the thing, because people don't want to feel as if they're being attacked. And a lot of white folks are going, oh my God, I'm nice. I have a black friend. So what you've got to do is create these spaces for people to be safe. And so what does that mean? To start a reading group where you're having these conversations where people are able to be vulnerable. And then you're in a position to then challenge the way that they think. But what you don't want it to turn into is a training where folks are going to trainings and everybody has been through these trainings and you would think the world would look different, but it doesn't. So it's not necessarily the training that's needed, it's the relationship. So training is important, education is important, but how do you do that in spaces where there's relationship, there's accountability, there's support, where you're walking people through? And so one of the things I've been challenging people to do is, how do you start these groups that white folks start and have reading groups and have conversations, and the folks that are a bit more conscious can lead those groups and begin to start moving people in a direction where they have their own enlightenment. I always tell people they need to journal. So how do you in these groups have people journal about from week to week how they're implementing that information? But in addition to that, how are they coming into contact with those experiences and how are they dealing with it? And then giving people real world examples and having them talk through, what would you do? If you were placed in this situation, how would you address it? But I think it's going to have to start with folks feeling comfortable to really dig down deep, because, there's a group of white folks who don't mind saying I'm, white and I'm proud and I hate everybody else. Yeah, we have that small fringe group. But for most white people who are just living their lives trying to do what they do, they don't see that there's a problem. They think they're doing the right thing, but it's going to require helping people to unpack, as I said, this stuff. And it's going to have to be in safe spaces with people they trust to be able to do that, because they're not going to say that to me, but they'll say it to you.
Yep. Peggy, did you have a question? No. Sorry to keep picking on you, Peggy.
She's asking good stuff. I appreciate it.
So, Froswa, I thank you immensely. This has been a fascinating conversation. I hope it's been as fascinating to the audience. I really thank you for being so open and for being a long-term friend. So
always give them my information, because you still have some questions coming through. So if you would share my information with folks, it's easy to find me, and I'll be glad to, like someone just asked about standpoint theory, I'll be glad to share that with you, because intersectionality, the theory that Kimberly Crenshaw came up with, some people say comes out of standpoint theory, but it's an old feminist rooted theory. You can find some stuff on, but I'll be glad to share with you from especially a Black feminist perspective or womanist perspective, what it looks like. So I'll be glad to share some stuff.
Well, if you would be so kind as to give us a bibliography we could post.
Yeah, I'll be glad to.
That would be phenomenal.
Okay, I'll be glad to. I just got one that I'm about to start reading through, so I'll share it.
So thank you very much. And I just want to highlight to everybody that a tape of this will be on our website, nonprofitaustin.org/civil society, where you'll also be able to read Froswa's full bio narrative, resources we've just talked about, the bibliography, and view previous and future episodes of of civil society. So I thank you all. I hope you all have a good, safe day. And again, I can't thank you enough, Froswa. My best regards to your daughter and mother, and you all have a great day.